Hey everyone, welcome back to the Money Level Show. Today I'm just doing a live video just to kind of give some updates and stuff. I actually had an interview that was supposed to happen, but the person probably didn't get the Zoom link. So I am just doing a live stream anyway. So today I want to talk about a few things. So we recently had a big market, kind of dip as of recently. What's going on, JT? Good to see you there. We had a big market dip recently. This was due to Evergrande, who is, I believe, a real estate giant out of China, and them having some credit issues or whatnot. And people were wondering if China was going to bail them out because China is a big supplier of a lot of things to the world as far as trade and everything. And so there were some issues there around there being a crisis over in China. And then you have something what's called contagion, which is how that could flow into other markets, into other countries. So we had big sell-offs in U.S. equities last week, which are equities or stocks. So we had big sell-offs, and I mean, I saw my portfolio take a big dip as well, but I stood strong. I had some defensive positions, so I didn't really experience as worse as some other people may have had if they were over leveraged in certain sectors such as growth stocks, tech stocks, things like that. Me personally, I like to have a diverse portfolio because it reduces the amount of risk that you take. So I have a little bit of tech, I have healthcare stocks, I have precious metal stocks, I have stocks that are around Bitcoin mining and stuff. I have stocks that are around uranium, oil, commodities, things of that nature. So I really just try to make sure that I'm diversified in a lot of different ways so that I won't be as impacted by a market correction that we've seen recently. And one of those ways that I protect myself, you all know that I brought Stephen Van Meter on earlier this year. He talked about bonds and how bonds can be a hedge against a market correction because it pretty much stays pretty solid. When market corrects, bonds usually go up. And then you can sell those bonds for a premium. You can sell those bonds for more than what you had them for, and then you could buy cheap equities. And so I own a little bit of bond ETFs as well. And so those are some of the things that I do. So JT, I see you got the Chuck Norris karate suit in the emoji in the chat. Man, appreciate you pointing that out. Defense. Defense wins championships. And so a couple of things going forward. So the Federal Reserve recently had their meeting, which was today. It was regarding the tapering. So when the Fed says that they're going to taper, that means that they're going to purchase less amounts of U.S. Bonds so that they can reduce their balance sheets. Right now, the Fed, their balance sheet it's at about 8.5 trillion right now. It has been skyrocketing ever since the pandemic, and the Fed keeps talking about this tapering thing. So tapering means that they're going to reduce the amount of bonds that they're buying from the U.S. government to finance politicians' endeavors. So if a politician runs for governor or whatever, and they promise, hey, we're going to give these type of checks to people, or we're going to do these types of programs. Those programs are not free. Those programs cost money. Same thing with the federal government. Whenever the federal government says like, hey, we're going to do stimulus, we're going to do unemployment checks, we're going to do rebates or whatever, when you purchase a house, that money isn't free. Even though, granted, we do have a money printer. However, the money printer is not backed by anything physical since Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. So the money is backed by faith solely. And as I talked with David Morgan recently, if faith collapses in the dollar, then we're going to have some major issues. So when the Fed talks about tapering, they mean that they're going to pull back from how much bonds they are buying um, from the government to finance these political endeavors, these political plans, and things like that. So the U.S. government, they promise something, they get the Fed to finance it, that goes on the U.S. government's debt, and so that's how our debt has gotten to 30 trillion, is by a lot of promises that the government has made and they try to finance, but they are not receiving enough tax dollars to finance that. They're not receiving enough income to finance the debt that they have taken on. So that is so the Fed is monetizing that. The Fed is financing that debt, and so when the Fed talks about tapering, what they're saying is that they're going to pull back how much they're buying per month. So currently, they are buying 120 billion, 120 billion worth of bonds or U.S. Treasuries each month. And so this is a lot of money. This caused the Fed's balance sheet to go to 8.5 trillion. What's going on, Thomas? Good to see you. Appreciate you for tapping in today. Um, so the Fed is buying 120 billion per month, and this makes it to where the U.S. debt is continuously growing, and then you also have um, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet growing at the same time. So when they're talking about tapering, that means they're going to reduce the amount of money that they are pouring um, into financing the government's debt, into corporate bonds, into the markets, all those different things. And so when they say that, you see the market react in a way where they start to sell their stocks because they're like, okay, the Fed is going to taper, interest rates are going to rise, and interest rates rise, then we see stocks start to sell off. This happened back in February. We did see a lot of tech stocks, doubling, tripling. It was crazy. A lot of people were making money. Um, I mean, gold bugs, we didn't really make a lot of money, but I mean, if you were in on the tech, yeah, Thomas, I agree with you. And I'm going to get to that for sure. Yeah, appreciate you for pointing that out. So we saw in February that tech stocks were really high. Once the interest rates started to creep up, so the Fed's been buying short-term interest rates, which are like the 1 month, 2 month, I think up to the 3 year or something like that, or the 5 year. So they're buying short-term interest rates or short-term bonds. So this is suppressing the short-term interest rates, and the federal funds rate is pretty low. However, the 10-year and the 30-year, they are not buying those long-term bonds just yet. And so once the 10 years started to increase in February, we saw big sell offs in the tech stocks. We saw stocks drop 50, 60% from the highs. I mean, Tesla hasn't really recouped that since then, stuff like that. So that was what was happening. So, as Thomas was saying, like the Fed can never raise rates. So, at the recent Fed meeting today, um, apparently from the article I was reading, the Federal Reserve was saying that they will be doing about 6 to 7 rate hikes between now and 2024, or in 2024, somewhere around there. So this is a lot of scare talk. So what I mean by that is that the Fed is saying that they're going to raise rates. When this happened before in 2018, the market saw a huge sell-off when Jerome Powell wanted to start tightening, doing quantitative tightening. Right now, we're doing quantitative easing, is where they're pumping a lot of money into the markets. But when Jerome Powell did quantitative tightening in 2018, we saw a big sell-off in the fall, winter of 2018, going into 2019. The Fed had to backtrack what they were doing, and then they had to start quantitative easing again. So this just goes to show that if the Fed stops pouring in the money, then the markets start to, and then you have a lot of issues with unemployment. You have a lot of issues with, and the Fed's top target that they want to target is unemployment. And so if the markets just tank, people lose their jobs, things like that, it's just counterproductive to what the Fed's trying to do, right? So what's going on, Zach? Good to see you. Good to see you, man. Um, so when the Fed does that, people lose jobs and things like that. So, and that's counterproductive. And so we saw that in 2018. 2019, we saw the repo spike, where the repo interest rate went up over about 10%. The repo market is kind of complicated to explain, but it's pretty much where these different banks and different fund managers, they exchange money overnight and stuff like that, and loan money and stuff like that. And so the interest rate went to 10%. So the Fed had to immediately come in and start pumping money into the repo market to get those interest rates back down. And this was right before we saw the big dip in 2020 and when the pandemic first hit. And so the Fed has been threatening to raise rates. You get some Fed presidents coming out saying that we need to raise rates. Then you get Jerome Powell coming out like, oh no, we're not going to raise rates. So it's like a good cop, bad cop strategy, because if the Fed raises rates by reducing the amount of bonds they're buying, what happens is that interest rates start to go up, right? If interest rates start to go up, who is that impact? That impacts the US government. That impacts the consumer. That impacts the businesses. It impacts the US government because our debt is so high that we have to pay it back with interest, right? So whenever the Fed is buying these bonds, bonds is a promise to pay back whoever buys the bond. So in World War II, the US citizen would buy the bond. And the Fed and the government would um, would actually promise to pay back a certain amount of percentage over however many years. So if you bought a 10-year bond, they'd be like, okay, 3%. So the issue with that is like if you have inflation and inflation is running like 5%, then you're losing money over that 10 years. So the US has to pay back this debt on interest. So the Fed is buying the debt and the US has to pay the Fed back on interest. And so if interest rates rise, the government can be rendered insolvent, right? If interest rates rise, corporations who are over debt will be considered insolvent. Consumers will be considered insolvent. And we saw kind of a picture of that in 2008 when people had a lot of they had a lot of arms, which is called adjustable rate mortgages that people were buying, and people were buying their homes. Banks were loaning out anything and everything. And whenever it came time for these rates to go up, so like when you buy an adjustable rate mortgage, they may lock you in an interest rate for a certain amount of period for a certain period of time. Say that period of time ends, the interest rate goes up with the market, goes down, goes up, goes down. And so people were buying in these adjustable rate mortgages, and then when their time period ended for their fixed rate, the interest rate would go up and they couldn't afford their mortgage payment. And so this is kind of just how some of those things work with the Federal Reserve and work with the interest rates. And so consumers can be rendered insolvent because we have a high level of consumer debt. And so I'm going to go to the chat real quick. So Zach Sanchez says, feel like it hit crypto this time round as well. Yeah, so crypto, I'm definitely bullish long term on crypto. But I do think that it's kind of hard to tell because we've seen all time highs in every single, almost every single coin. But usually it goes through these halving cycles. So Bitcoin goes through a halving cycle, then you get a bull market. And so I don't know if this is similar to I believe it's 2013. We saw Bitcoin make a new high, and then it came down, and then it went up and then reached the all time high again, but then it came down again. So we'll see how this plays out. If this is going to be the bear market for cryptocurrencies, I personally have took profits, bought precious metals. Precious metals are severely cheap, and I pretty much bought another undervalued asset. Also put money into my Roth IRA as well. So I still hold a little bit of crypto position, which I'm gonna hold on to, but I took a lot of those profits off the table. And so we'll see what happens. Then Thomas says, if they don't increase the debt ceiling, look out below, or they pass legislation and inflation to the moon. Gold, silver. Yes, I agree. Precious metals is going to be key. A lot of people have been saying this over for years and years and years and years. I personally think that precious metals is going to thrive, especially in as we heading into this world of cybersecurity issues, as we see the debt limit increasing and increasing, as we see. I posted an article earlier on the YouTube where the Biden administration is cracking down on a crypto exchange for leading to ransomware attacks and things like that. So I think that precious metals is definitely the contrarian investment right now, and that it's going to. I believe that it's going to go a lot higher, especially as inflation continues to increase. And so another thing with inflation is that in the 80s, Paul Volcker was able to raise interest rates because the debt was low. So we didn't have as much debt in the 80s as we do now. I believe until 1996, we had about 5 trillion in debt from the start of the country to 1996. Then after 1996, we've pretty much went up to 29 trillion, 28, 29 trillion. So yeah, so inflation is going to run hot. They can't stop the inflation machine. They have to reduce the debt, and the only way to reduce the debt is to either tighten and not lend out as much, which is going to pretty much render the government insolvent, or they're going to have to let inflation run to the moon, like Thomas is saying. And so yep. And so, yeah, definitely, Thomas. So when rates rise, it's going to be a crash of all time. So I'm making sure that I'm positioned in a way to where I have cash, where I have uh, dry powder to actually take advantage of any dips in the market. So Zach said, yeah, Solana, Ethereum, and Cardano dipped hard recently. Robinhood recently announced crypto wallets so you can actually send and receive. Yes, and I think crypto wallets are becoming very mainstream in a lot of ways. And I think that, governments can easily crack down on Robinhood and have them reveal, which wallet or which serial numbers on whichever wallets or product that they gave sold to whoever or whatnot. I just think that that's kind of one of the cons. I think that that's a centralized way. I had recently had a debate with a friend of mine who watches the channel, and he was talking about how um, crypto is a better investment. And I'm like, yeah, like it has outperformed precious metals. However, we say that crypto is very decentralized. It is in some ways, but whenever you get to like exchanges that are required to submit to regulators in their countries or whatnot, then that means it's centralized. And so, same thing with the hardware wallets. Uh, I mean, you have to download an app. So whether you get a Trezor or a Ledger, you have to download an app. And so this comes from a company that has to submit to regulators in their country. And so I just think that it's hard to really determine that. So like if you can't get your crypto off of the exchange or off of your wallet, or not because you can't download the app or whatever, like what happens in that scenario? I mean, there may be a way around it. I'm not fully sure. Um, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about the Chinese equities. So China does have a lot of risk involved. I mean, we've seen their stocks tank in a lot of ways. Recently, I mean, Chinese government said they were going to implement certain regulations and things like that. I think that the Chinese equities are actually very cheap right now. They were already had good valuations, and then now they're extremely good valuations. If you want to be the contrarian, and if you want to potentially make some massive gains, Alibaba, for example, the high was 300, dropped down to 210. It was really good valuation around 210. Now it's at 150. It actually hit 149 yesterday. And so I've been buying Alibaba. I've been buying Tencent. Tencent was at the recent high was at 110. It's now at like 56, 57. JD, the high was 100, 110. Went down to 60, I think 62. Now it's hovering around 70 something. Um, and same thing like with KWeb. I do KWeb, which is the ETF. The high was about 105, somewhere around there, and then it hit 64. So I've been buying some of the Chinese equities. That's kind of like my contrarian play, and then also just knowing that a lot of U.S. stocks are overvalued right now. And so I definitely been buying some of the Chinese stocks and some other countries and emerging markets and stuff too. So I wanted to give a couple updates for the channel before I head off for the day. I want to say shout out to Zach. Zach actually helped me with a website for the Money Level show. So we are wrapping that up and getting that ready to go. So I appreciate you, Zach. Be sure to check out his business and whatnot. Zach, if you can drop that in the comments or whatnot, if you're still there, that would be great. So we are getting a website developed for the Money Level show. I am going to be going back to live streaming and also doing my podcast episodes, just because I want to be able to consistently put content out. A lot of times doing these interviews and editing and stuff, it can get very complicated. I actually changed my setup up a little bit. I bought a webcam, a nice, decent webcam for my actual computer because it was trash. So I had to change that up. And then so I'm getting some new equipment just to kind of make it a little more easier. I've also started a Patreon and I'm getting that together. So the Patreon will be something where you can give a monthly donation to support the channel. However, I do have access to a Discord. So the Discord is going to be available to everyone. It's going to show like which stocks that I'm investing in for long term, which are the conservative plays, dividend plays that I'm actually invested in. I'm also going to have my high growth stocks, stocks that I believe are going to grow in the future. So that's one thing that I'm working on, as well as my Discord, which is also going to have some of the options, the call options and put options that we may play to make money. And then we'll have updates on crypto and updates on gold and silver as well, and then a chat for the people. So the Discord will be launching here soon. I am just getting the Patreon together along with the website, and then the Discord will be coming along with that. So I want to encourage you all to join so that we can all make money together. I also want to do a 90-day course on or a 90-day kind of program just on financial fitness, so getting in financial shape. So if you know anyone that may need some accountability, or if it's you yourself, and then we focus on tackling debt, investing, paying ourselves first, all those different things. And I'm actually working on that program now so that we can all prosper together. So I do have a few more interviews coming up. I just did an interview with Wendy Day, who was she manages a lot of artists in the hip hop industry. She was good friends with Tupac. She helped a lot of artists get record deals such as Eminem, Cash Money Records, Lil Donald, and some other people. So she's helped a lot of people. I got some upcoming interviews with Jim Rogers, as well as King Randall. So King Randall is a young 21-year-old black conservative who started his own school for youth that he saw, really struggling in his community. And he's really very about self-sufficiency and how to be able to, escape the rat race and be able to do for self. And so he's pretty good guy. I've been seeing him quite a bit. He was on Valuetainment. He was on Roland Martin. He was on Officer Tatum's channel as well. So he's been buzzing. Yep, he was on Roland Martin. So I may have to bring you on that interview with me, JT. So we need to talk about that. Well, actually, I think you may be at work at the time, but we'll figure it out. So yeah, so I want to thank you all for joining. I will be sure to update all as these things, different things begin to roll out. And so I appreciate you all for joining today. All right, y'all have a blessed day. Peace.